is the Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group. I'll start with a little bit about QCRG and myself and how and why we've been engaged in this issue for years of basically like work specifically around land recycling and condemnation for 20 years, and then again land recycling and condemnation and demolition for the last about 5. QCRG is Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group. We've been around 25 years. We're a nonprofit that is essentially a membership association of community development organizations. So, for example, Operation Butterrock has been a member of QCRG for several years now. We convene the vacant property working group because vacant properties, as everyone has many people have expressed already this evening, is one of the issues that is common to all of our members. It is citywide. While there are areas in our city that absolutely have more vacancy and blight than others, it is a thread that crosses all of our neighborhood boundaries. So at that table, the Warmer Consensus Group has been participating for the past several years as well. Currently, we have 42 members, and they're all, again, organizations. 38 of them are community-based, 4 of them are partner organizations that help us accomplish our work around education, capacity building, and policy work. So again, the vacant property working group has been my area at QCRG since I joined QCRG staff 6 years ago. And then, as the Reverend was referring to, about 4 to 4.5 years ago, we really engaged very actively with the URA and other partners in what's called the Land Recycling Task Force to really study this issue as to how we can look at our current systems, government systems, our community system and systems, and how they interact, and how we can get ahead of, be proactive and get ahead of the problem, because up until, including and through today, we are not outpacing the scale of blight and vacancy, tax delinquency and abandonment. And this is something that everyone in this room knows and sees on a daily basis. So, I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about condemnation and demolition, and I'll talk a little bit more about land recycling and land banking, and what that means. But since 2010, through the Vacant Property Working Group, which is an issue-based table that meets monthly for any and all stakeholders interested in the issue, which includes anyone around in this room tonight. We meet the second Friday of every month and a half for about 15 years at 9 a.m. It doesn't change. We meet guaranteed almost every single month, second Friday. We'll be there. Please come.
Where?
At the QCRG offices. We're in the Hill District at 1901 Center Avenue, right next to the Hill House. And again, it's a citywide table. Our offices are, but we tackle issues and discuss issues that affect us citywide. About 4 years ago, the city was able to essentially look at its budget and put they doubled their budget for 3 years and 3 years only, and gone back to its 2009 level into demolition, citywide. And what that means is for 2010, 11, 12, essentially there were around 400 and 500 demolitions in the city of Pittsburgh. Again, citywide. In doing that, the city said, if we're going to increase demolition, we don't just want to do it in a vacuum. We want to do it with community input if possible. So they came to us and said, if we provide you with the citywide list of condemnations, and you distribute it to your members and to the groups around the table, and ask them to give us input based on whatever they determine is most valuable to them in their neighborhood, in their community. And there are so many issues and criteria and ways to evaluate a structure and what its future could be, whether it's a preservation, a rehabilitation, revitalization opportunity, or potentially a demolition and a greening opportunity, and anywhere in between, because there are spaces in between there as well. And the city, we don't want to say how to make the decision through what lens, because each community has a different set of priorities, but essentially, there's the economics, there's public safety, there's community fabric, there's history, there's many, many factors that can go into this decision. So if communities, can you provide us and tell us essentially what your priorities are? If you could tell us, we absolutely need these 5 structures, or these 10, or these 20 structures demolished, and we needed them demolished yesterday because they're close to the school, they're across the street from the school, or they really are falling down, or they're right in the middle of this plan that we have for a community garden, or expanded recreation facility, or a new development. Or on the opposite side, these are the 10 we absolutely need to preserve. We understand that they're condemned, and that it's gone through a legal process that costs money, which has taken over a year, by the way. It takes over a year for the city if they check all their check boxes off right in a row. It takes over a year to get a structure condemned. And the city, short of an emergency, cannot demolish a building unless it has been legally condemned. So even within the subset of, or the universe of structures that we have in the city of Pittsburgh, there's a very small subset that is currently legally condemned and that could potentially be demolition. But to say, these are the 10 that, for the reasons you've identified, we really feel need to be or should be demolished. These are the 10 on our list of condemnations in our community that need to be preserved. And from there, the city can take that input and take that input into consideration with other stakeholder input, because as you mentioned, the neighbor next door might not be talking to your community, but they might be calling Councilman Burgess, or they might be calling, their neighbor next door and expressing that they have a different opinion, or that they have a different set of priorities one way or another. But at least then a conversation can happen between the community and the community, the council member, the other stakeholders that might have provided input, and the city agencies that are engaging in the condemnation and demolition process. And we got a lot more response in the first few years, and the groups that did provide input really did see that input was taken seriously into consideration, and those structures that they earmarked or flagged for priority demolition were demoed, and those they earmarked for preservation were essentially stabilized to, first floor windows and doors sealed and, if and where possible, stabilized. Now, that's not to say everything that you prioritize for preservation can be preserved. There could be a hole in the roof that you can't see from the street or you don't know about. Homes have trees growing in the middle of them. They've had pipes burst and water pouring down. But again, at least that provides the opportunity, and has over the last few years, to have that conversation and say, we understand that this is the input you gave us. At the same time, here's a new set of information, and unfortunately you have to demolish or do something different with this property. And then on the preservation side, we spoke about the cost to rehabilitate a structure and how the economics oftentimes are, I would say oftentimes, 2.9 out of 10 or more times, really one of the most major stopping points as to why the future of many of these properties in some ways been predetermined. So to say we want this structure preserved helps start a conversation, but it's only the starting point, because who's going to preserve it? Where are they going to get the money? What are they going to do with this structure? What's their timeline? All of these things factor into what that is. Because the city, if you ask the city, please, we want to preserve this, the city's not saying, okay, great, we're going to go rehab this structure tomorrow or even in 6 months. But they're, at the very least, going to be able to hold off or focus other on where they engage their condemnation and demolition resources. So from a numbers perspective, there are, I have a few handouts. I'm sorry. I was planning on having a slideshow so I can provide them afterwards. But in the city of Pittsburgh, the whole city, there are approximately 113,000 structures. At any given time in the city of Pittsburgh, there are between 1,300 and 1,500 buildings that are condemned, about 1% of all of the structures in the city of Pittsburgh.
On an annual basis?
Not newly condemned, just total overall.
No, 1,300, 1,500 annually that are condemned or set to be condemned.
That have a legal condemnation status.
That's what I hope.
Yeah. Not newly given, but just at the beginning of the year, coming into the year, about 1,300 to 1,500.
And you said that
now, if the city,
that's a property that takes a year to get a property on the condemnation list?
Right, that's why it's not, yes. So every year, if the city demolishes between 300 and 500, it's going to be about 200 to 300 this year, depending on what the budget is. And they have the resources to newly condemn because BVI is out on a daily basis, looking at structures, citing them for code violations, following up on code violations. And it costs money to go through this legal process. The petition of court gives you an order of condemnation costs money, so that's part of the city budget as well. And the city, the court, you have to give so many days notice, you have to do, this is a year-long process. Again, at its shorter.
So the court, you're saying the court issues the notice of condemnation?
Yes, it is a judge, it is a court issued notice. Not code violations or citations, but the actual condemnation notice.
So what little house was demolished like within hours?
Okay.
Came back home and the house was gone.
There is the ability to do it.
If that took a year,
I'm sorry, I would be happy to.
Are you speaking from the code, or are you speaking from what is the law, or are you speaking from what is tax?
I would say both. The one exception, which I mentioned at the beginning, is that in emergency cases there is the ability to spot condemn.
I think it's more productive to let her go through her discussion and then ask the questions afterwards, because we'll get on individual issues and not get overall information out to the people.
Okay, and so please, I'd like to revisit that individually. So the spot condemnation emergencies where there are fires, for example, or hill slides, and buildings are destabilized, there is the ability to spot condemn, and that is faster. But it's emergency cases. So if every year there are about, we'll say, 1,300 to 1,500 to 1,400 structures on the condemnation list, it takes a year to go through the process to even get them there. That means 3 existing structures. The city has the resources to demolish 300 and the resources to put about approximately 300 new structures into condemnation. We are maintaining the status quo. There have been for the last 4 to 5 years, 13 to 1,500 structures on the condemnation list. And there are some that have been on for 5, 10 years, and there are others that have gone on years ago and have since been demolished. But in essence, we have about the same number on that list. Here, I'm sorry I didn't have it neighborhood based, but in wards 12 and 13, there are approximately 7,000 total structures. And in any given year, there's approximately 200 to 300 between the two. Yeah, about 300 condemned.
300 condemned.
Condemned. Again, absolutely here in Homewood, and Homewood as we're in right now, but all of District 9 and Ward 12 and 13, there's absolutely a disproportionate amount of blight. There's going to be more condemnations and more resources towards demolition. As everyone mentioned, as many have mentioned already this evening, it's one piece of the puzzle. So I know that this was brought before council several weeks ago, so I did want to spend some time talking about the community input process that has worked in some communities that have taken advantage of it, and it still exists. as well as what some of the numbers look like here, and how this is one piece of the puzzle, because as Gregory and others mentioned, condemnations and demolitions are one of the only options currently available to us. Because legally, there's not much we can do.
Could you repeat that again?
Perfect time. Right now, for the city of Pittsburgh, as a public entity who is bound by state law, the laws, codes and laws that set out, currently condemnations and demolitions are one of the only interventions available to us on much of this blighted, delinquent, vacant land.
Is that because getting title is much easier once it's down? I know that getting title takes 2 or 3 years at this point, even on vacant lots.
Not necessarily once the house is, it's not necessarily easier once the house is down,
But
actually.
it does take longer than a year worth of stuff.
It does take longer. It currently takes approximately 2 years to get to clear title.
And I noticed
When you can, but sometimes you often can't even get there.
I noticed that doubled roughly in the past 3 to 4 years.
If we could resist having the interrogatory, and so she can get information out, and then we can go on our own individual concerns. So there's, I want
As a resident, I would like to,
if I could get her to get all the information out, and then after that, I want Mr. Dito to say some things, and then I'll come back and deal with individual issues. Okay?
And I'll talk about that and why and how this has changed, where it is now, how we take under the new state law and we're looking at things to build efficiency. I mean, some of it's about building efficiency, and others of it is about another piece of it is taking advantage of new powers given to us by state law, which is the current conversation that's really happening. Condemnations and demolition fees is one piece of the puzzle, and the types of intervention strategies available to us in community building and community revitalization are very limited because of access to land and limited legal access to land. And that is something that the state gives us. Our ability to access land is given to us by state law. It's not something that we can change here in the city government or locally or in Allegheny County by a will of county council or city council. It literally takes state law change. And here, because we are a Commonwealth in Pennsylvania, and particularly southwestern Pennsylvania, property rights of landowners are incredibly tightly protected by stakeholders far beyond the district. So accessing land is a particularly difficult struggle here in southwestern Pennsylvania, but across Pennsylvania at large. So to transition into land banking and land recycling a little bit, what has happened across the country? So we're not for better or worse, we're not pioneers in this issue. At the same time, we don't have to start from scratch, and there are models that we can use to learn from that what they've done right and wrong, and everyone is pleased. There are over 80 at this point what's called land banks operating in the country. And essentially what a land bank is it is a public entity, a legal public entity that ties the delinquent tax collection and foreclosure process to land revitalization. And it does it at a scale in which we have not been able to utilize or enjoy in the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County up until this point. It's not to say land recycling hasn't happened or isn't happening. It's not to say we're not trying to essentially bank land in some of our communities. But it's been reactive by and large. We're just now trying to crack the nut of being proactive about it. been reactive, and it's been limited to opportunities where end users and end uses are identified, which, given where our economy has been over the last 15 to 20 plus years, has been limited, where private dollars or community groups are able to put together projects, and it has been more limited. Recently, we started to see the transition of stronger markets and stronger communities based on the work of many of the people around this table. But that also means we have to get ahead of the game so that we can be part of this conversation and the private market doesn't get to all the land before we can and have an input in it. So over the last 15 years, the city has used what's called the treasurer's sale, which is the tax foreclosure sale. It's sort of like when a bank forecloses on an unpaid mortgage. The city has the ability on behalf of the county and school district or city, all three or any one of the combination, to foreclose on unpaid taxes. Unpaid real property taxes. I'm sorry, doesn't include wage taxes or income taxes. Unpaid real property taxes. But there's a lot of process involved in that, and there's a lot of resources that go into that. It's something that's been given to us again by the state called the Second Class B Treasurer's Sale Tax Collection Act.
It also puts people out of their houses and creates vacant homes, which is presumably not what you're trying to do.
We can talk a little bit about that, but the city actually has, over the last 20 years, taken, I believe, less than 2 dozen occupied structures through this process. So
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last time.
Over the last 20 years, we've taken less than 2 dozen structures that are occupied through this process. In the hundreds of thousands that it has over the last 20 years used to go through this process. It could take occupied, but we have enough tax delinquency and vacancy at this point in time that we really focus there and not putting people out on the street. And part of what's tied to this process is a very strict and compassionate hardship provision and payment plan process for homeowners that are good homeowners that otherwise have fallen on hard times for whatever reason can't pay their taxes, to give them the opportunity to get into a payment plan and do so. But, maybe this is my personal professional opinion, but there's also a significant set of the population that is taking advantage of that fact, that knows that the city of Pittsburgh will not take their land if it is occupied. So they don't pay their taxes, but they keep a tenant in that structure, and they're collecting their rent monthly, but the city is not getting the tax benefit. But they're paying the public. They're delivering public services around that home for sure. So there is absolutely a role for a conversation to be had around how occupied, not necessarily owner-occupied, but occupied structures can play into this conversation, because they are in where we are in homeless units, also like influence on our community, where people are taking advantage of the system right now. So you have to build in both. You have to build in a system that is equitable, that is across the city, that is enforceable, so people know you have to pay your taxes. Owning land is both a right, but it's also a responsibility. The city needs to fund itself to deliver its services. At the same time, equitable process that you do across the city that has to be enforceable has to build in hardship and be compassionate as well, and take into account that every situation is different. So that's really where this conversation is right now. Again, as I mentioned, by and large, up until the point of the last 2 decades of the reactive process, if we went at our current rate, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the numbers and the situation right now in the city of Pittsburgh. But if we say that there are 8,000 tax delinquents and abandoned, so both, because there's a lot more tax delinquents than there are vacant in the city of Pittsburgh. And part of this isn't about taking the tax delinquents that are occupied, as much as getting those people to pay their taxes, or get them into a payment plan, but at least identify where's the difference. So it goes to an inventory, to knowing the differences between them. So to really look at the numbers there, so even if you just look at that 8,000, that subset of 8,000 that are both tax delinquent and vacant, and we can talk about other numbers and other ways you can look at that data. At our current rate, if we were able to take, using our current capacity, our current resources, not taking advantage of the state bill, 450 properties a year, hopefully collecting more taxes, but those properties that are currently abandoned, blighted, not paying taxes, taking them into a public ownership situation, and then getting only half of them, actually half is a pretty good number, back onto the tax rolls, back into productive use, back into the community's hands, back into a private investor's hands. It would take us 60 years at that rate to clear this log. And I might be around for 60 more years, but I don't want to wait. So the state has given us, in October, passed the Land Bank Act. It became law in December, the end of December 2012. Well, a gift from the one of but so in January, so here we are, the first half of 2013. Philadelphia, which is a city and a county combined, they have one government, unified government, and unified school systems, so it's a little bit easier there. If you want to have the larger conversations, but here in the city of Pittsburgh, we can do it. We have a city and a school district that are contiguous. City and County of Philadelphia has introduced legislation already. Dauphin County, where Harrisburg, our state seat is, our state capital, passed land banking legislation. We didn't even know they were having a conversation. They just wanted to run it. So that's exciting. Reading, Lancaster, Erie, there's a couple other places that are having this conversation along with Pittsburgh. We do have legislation that was introduced in October by Councilman Burgess, and you've already mentioned that you're working with several other council members to really analyze the state bill now that we have it, and enhance essentially the proposal, and get us to a place where we really are taking that 60 years, what we believe, the land recycling task force, and I'll just take a couple minutes to talk about that work, and then I'll stop, I promise. Take what we believe is that 60-year window, and again, only looking at the subset of 8,000, because there are other ways and other opportunities down to a 9-year horizon. Now, how that interacts with maintenance and management, with policies and procedures that allow for local subcontracting and local jobs and focus on community development more than just the land aspect. Those are things that are conversations, and those are things that are taking place now and will take place as not just the legislation, but the policies and procedures come in, are built for this structure. But the land recycling task force was essentially a table of about 20 different stakeholders that engage in the current land recycling process. And then over time, that was a 2-year process, and then that official timeline ended, and they made recommendations, and then sort of we still didn't have state authorization, so we were trying to figure out how can we do an interim strategy, given that we don't have state law, how do we make the best of our system now? So a few, 5, 6 people stayed around the table and kept trying to do essentially a business plan, an economic analysis, and really figured out what this means in terms of how you finance these operations, which includes the ability to not just acquire, not just have a publicly available inventory, but also manage and maintain, and then how you dispose of these properties and get them back into productive use. And I've really spent a lot of time and energy and gone through that and relayed that to council, and that laid the foundation for some of the legislation that's gone on. Is there anything that you can do to touch on that I haven't?
No, I would